Should the federal minimum wage be increased or not? To what level, if yes or no?
Well, as we discussed the minimum wage issue, this is something that I have been open to the debate, to having the debate, because I recognize that it hasn't been addressed in many years. But I think there's a better way to deal with this, with all due respect. And that's a fundamental belief that I hold dear. That is that local government, the government closest to the people, governs best. And allowing a community like Olean, allowing a community like Corning, Elmira, Jamestown, allowing a state to weigh in and change its minimum wage laws, I think is the better way to go. Because what works in Olean at $10 an hour or whatever the number may be, does not necessarily work in inner city New York City, or in Chicago, or in San Francisco. Allowing the communities to have that control, I think, is better suited for this debate than having a one-size-fits-all type of standard coming out of Washington, D.C. What I will offer you is there is a clear contrast here. And it is also represented by that extreme liberal agenda that we're talking about in this race. There are people, like my opponent and others that subscribe to the policy, that are talking about wage increases when it comes to the minimum wage of a livable wage. Well, that sounds nice, but what are the numbers behind it? We have seen things like $15 an hour, $22 an hour, which is the national livable wage calculation, to go out and study it and look at it. That is excessive. And when we talk about raising the wages to these levels, we also have to talk about what are the impact on job creators? What are impacts on people in small businesses? The restaurants that we went out when we were on the job series, where we're out there talking to people on the front line, and they're struggling. They're struggling in this economy. And one of the things we got to do with eyes wide open, if we talk about increasing the minimum wage, these costs are going to kill tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of jobs across America. And we have to go in with our eyes wide open. And I will do that as we go forward in this debate.
Everyone should please pay attention. I believe my opponent just said he's against the federal minimum wage. A minimum wage is a floor. It's a floor. If communities think that they can support it and their cost of living requires a higher wage, like Seattle, where they voted a higher wage, and New York might be, or New York City might be relevant, that's one thing. We're talking about the floor. And do you know $7.25 an hour? That's $15,000 a year. People can't make a living, can't even live on that. Now, what that means, $15,000 a year, that's corporate welfare, because that's where Walmart says you're going to make $7.25 an hour working full-time. And by the way, here's the phone number of the social services office, so you can go get Medicaid, and here you can go get, if you work for Walmart, you need heating assistance, you need food stamps to get through the month. And that's even before you start talking about raising kids. The federal minimum wage of $7.25 is appalling. And my opponent is trying to muddy the waters by talking a living wage. Last week he talked about Tompkins County, $22 an hour, complete fabrication. We're talking about a livable wage of 12 something, and that's just for certain contracts. That's not the minimum. We're talking about a minimum wage that people can raise a family on. And I just think we need to be supporting people who work full-time. In this country, you should not work full-time and live in poverty. You should not have to go get food stamps because you can't get to the end of the month if you're working full-time. I'm for jobs to support families. I'm for people making their way in this economy. By the way, it's a women's issue. I'll get back to that in my rebuttal.
Thank you. Everybody's done a pretty good job so far, but again, we don't want to cut into anybody's time. Keep it, we're not turning this into a rally, okay? 1 minute.